So today we're going to move on to the next step of our sketchbook making, and we're going to prepare the color and the painting on the front of our sketchbooks. So you will need your sketchbook cover. I've asked you to purchase just a couple of the inexpensive craft paints from the store. This Apple Barrel brand will work great. If you have nicer acrylic paints too at home, you are welcome to use any of those, anything like that. Those are just the most inexpensive and they will work perfectly fine for what we're going to do. Just something that's an acrylic based paint. Now I'm going to work today on this blue sketchbook cover because the quote that I've picked out I think will work better for this older example. And this book I've made with the mixed media paper. So it's a painting quote, so I want to make sure it's a sketchbook that I can actually paint in. That makes more sense. And I'll just choose a different quote in the future to go with this yellow one. So I've got some paints, I've got a paintbrush, paper towel, water cup, and I've got just something to put my paints in. This is just like the lid from a can of potato chips and just like a little throwaway Tupperware container from some snacks. You can use whatever you've got, paper plate, anything that can be thrown away when you're done. You'll also need a ruler and a pencil. Now the first thing that we're going to do is figure out where and how you want your page with what you want to have painted versus what you want to be left of the fabric design, and kind of like how big and the placement and all that sort of stuff for your quote. So I'm going to just do a really quick sketch of what this front cover looks like just to give you an idea for what I want to do. Here is the front cover. I'm going to create an inset where I still want to see the blue, and I think I'm going to maybe have it take up about a little less than the top half of the page. I'm going to have this one be smaller. All of this space I'm going to leave as my blue pattern fabric, but then this smaller section is what I'm going to paint today, and then this is where I will put my quote in later. That's what it's going to look like, and I'll show you how we're going to mark that out. With my ruler, I'm going to decide how far down I want this to be, and I think I want to give myself ½ of an inch. So just in pencil, I'm going to mark out ½ of an inch and then line my ruler up along that marking. Now, I'm going to also create, I want to have a similar border on the sides. From this side, I'm going to come in ½ of an inch and go over until I have just ½ of an inch left there. So that would be to that point. And I'm going to go over that a couple of times to see if I can get that to show up in pencil. And it's kind of hard to see, but there you can see where I've got it mapped out. And now I'm going to turn my book and do the same thing. I'm going to just make sure I measure down ½ of an inch. Make sure my line doesn't get crooked. And now I'm going to decide how long I want that to be. So let's see. I think I'll make it about 4 inches long. So there's that mark. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Make sure I've come in ½ of an inch. And then from here, come down 4. And then I'm going to connect those across the bottom, and I really want to make sure that this is all my lines that I'm making are pretty straight. I'm just going to eyeball it and just make sure everything looks lined up, and then I'll connect my pencil marks there. I'm trying to be very careful to not let my pencil marks go outside of the frame that I want and like extend them for too far, because it does make it really hard to erase on this fabric surface, and I don't want that to be visible. So now I have this section marked out. Now this next part is optional that you do not have to do, but if you happen to have some masking tape at your house, or my absolute favorite is the blue painter's tape, you can use this as a barrier to help line the edges of the frame where you want your quote to go. So you can take sections of tape, match it up along that edge very carefully, and then really press and seal that down really, really well. And then you could just go all the way around and do that. But you do have to make sure that you have that sealed very, very well, or else sometimes paint will accidentally scooch underneath, and then you won't have a nice clean edge when you're done. But I'm going to show you what that looks like, how to do that on two sides, but on the other two sides I'm going to show you what to do if you don't have tape, which is totally fine. We're just going to paint nice clean edges. And then you're going to get your paints and your brush and everything set up. So starting with a damp brush, I am going to just paint this whole section, just a flat layer of this background color. Now, if you have tape, a trick that I like to do is brush along the edge of the tape to lay in that color, but you never want to brush towards the tape because that's much more likely to scooch the paint underneath your tape. So you want to brush along the tape or away from the tape, but never towards it. And I'm just going to paint away. Now, if you don't have tape, but what you want to do is just make sure you can turn your book to where it's comfortable for your hand, and just very carefully, I call this edging in, create very nice smooth edges where your paint needs to end. And you can use a smaller paintbrush for that if you feel comfortable with something smaller. I'm a big fan of a flat brush for big flat coverage painting, but just whatever you have is fine. And you'll notice I don't have perfect coverage on this first coat, so I'm going to do a second and possibly third coat, just depending on how many coats it takes to make this fully cover up all of the fabric underneath. Now for this sketchbook, I have mapped out a different shape just to kind of show you. This time I did a larger section with a 1-inch border all the way around on all 4 sides. And this part, I'm gonna paint just solid flat white.